PHP and MySQL are commonly used for database programming on the web. PHP is the most widely used programming language used to create dynamic websites, and MySQL is the most popular relational database. A PHP application uses an API or application programming interface called PHP Data Objects or PDO to interact with MySQL and other database systems. It requires a database-specific PDO driver, which is usually included when PHP is installed. To create a connection from your website, first create a PDO object specifying the DSN and your MySQL credentials to the database. The DSN stands for Data Source Name and is a string that contains the DSN prefix such as MySQL, the host name of your database, the database's server port number if it has one, so that's optional, and the dbname or database name. A PDO exception is thrown if the PDO constructor method fails to connect to MySQL successfully. But fortunately, PHP can be set up to handle errors in several ways, such as outputting the error message to the web page or sending the message in a web server log file. To execute a statement, you'll use the query method, which returns a PDOStatement object. False is returned if there's an error trying to do this, or true if there is returned if there's no error. In this example, a PDO object creates a connection to MySQL. The setAttribute function is called, which makes the PDO object throw a PDO exception when a SQL error occurs, rather than checking the query return value for false. The query function executes the insert statement in the SQL string, so the movie Ghostbusters is inserted into the movie table. MySQL server returns information to the web server indicating the result of the insert statement. The information is returned from query as a PDO statement. And then the row count function returns 1 because one row was inserted into the movie table. A better way of doing inserts is to use a prepared statement because this avoids SQL injection attacks. This is where the hacker can try to change the values of SQL statements. So a prepared statement is a SQL statement where you can provide parameter values directly from user input by using placeholders called parameter identifiers. So the question marks in the examples are the placeholders, and we use these rather than data literals. So in this example, we're creating an insert into movies insert query where we're passing data to ID, name, and rating with the values set to placeholders. So whatever goes in first in the parentheses is going to be set to the ID, second will be name, third will be rating. And then in the next statement, we see a function called to prepare, which prepares a parameterized SQL statement to be ready to get executed and returns a PDOStatement object. And then we have 3 calls to bind a value. So in this SQL statement, it binds a value to the parameter identifier. So the first question mark will be set to the movie ID, second will be the movie name, and third will be the movie rating. So here you would have your actual data that you want inserted into the database. So instead of movie ID, you could have like 001, the movie name can be Ghostbusters, and the movie rating can be PG-13. Or there could be variables set to the values shown here in this example. The execute function executes the SQL statements with the bound parameters, and if there is an error, it'll throw a PDO exception. So in this example, we're executing the insert statement. In your PHP web page, let's say it's called addmovie.php, it should then display a confirmation message that movie was inserted into the database. After you have some data in your database, you might want to fetch those values. So the execute function call creates a cursor object when you execute a PDO statement with the select statement. Fetch returns an array of indexed row data, or false if no row is selected. The row data is either indexed by the column name or a column number, and use a loop in the cases where a select statement returns multiple rows of data. To move a cursor, each call to fetch returns the next row from the result table or returns false if there's no more records to return. So in this code example, the prepared statement is executed, selecting the name and price of Amazon movies that are PG-13 and from the year 2020 or newer. Fetch returns an array containing a single row from the results table, and the while loop processes each row until all the rows are processed and the result values are accessed from the $row, which uses the column names as the index.